And hello, this is Jonathan McGuinness again from Questions of Fire. I'm delighted to have a repeat guest today. This is somebody who I would hope I'm actually aligning with, I would nearly say that. He sets up a great philosophical and practical environment for multiple groups of people and inspires them. We'll start off for those who are new in a very visual way. He provokes. I'll call him a provocateur with a visual set of weapons and tools to do this. Let me please welcome from Pakistan. His name is Saud Masud. Saud, welcome again to the show. Delighted to have you on again, sir.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. It's again, it's my pleasure. It's my honor. It's been a wild and fun and enlightening ride since we have connected over the last couple of months, I think.
Yeah.
And it's been amazing. So I really appreciate you having me back on. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. We've got a lot to unpack today.
Brilliant. We talked about this a little bit before, so since now we have a bit more of a relationship, we sort of picked the topics out, which is I think it's important for everybody, and it's about the Rubble. Maybe before we get into how to deal with Rubble, explain what Rubble is and what we mean by Rubble as we're talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it came from our last conversation where I referenced the term Rubble, and this is really about the aftermath of tragedy or adversity. It's, we all go through this at some point in life, some more, some less, but I think it's this experience that we thought X and then Y happened. So we thought one thing and something else happened. And, I think just dealing with the after effects of it, because it can happen in so many different ways. Like practically speaking, a Rubble could be a financial loss. You worked all your life building a certain amount of assets and the stock market collapsed or something like that. In some cases, it's unfortunately health. You go to a doctor and you get diagnosed with a terminal situation, for instance. It could be a betrayal. You've got a spouse or a loved one that, for one reason or the other, they end up betraying you, and your life comes crashing down, and it's no different than an earthquake or a natural disaster like a storm, where it kind of indiscriminately brings everything down to ground, right? So raises it to the ground, in other words. And what I mean by that is, like, I've seen a situation where somebody became ill and they ended up then getting divorced a few months later because of the side effects or the after effects of that illness, or vice versa. They went through a very tough breakup and then they became ill. So there's this reverberation effect that kind of creates a rubble after rubble after rubble, a crisis after crisis after crisis, if you will. So that's how I look at the term Rubble. It's the after effects of a crisis.
Excellent, Saud. I'm going to present, because I think some ways when we have a conversation, and I've built up a lot of trust in you by seeing your conversations, not just with me and others, I'm going to present you a Rubble of my own. I've worked as a consultant for 20 odd years. And as a big part of that, I used to have to travel a lot. I have 4 boys, but they've had different amounts of attention from me. I would say the younger boys had a lot less because of the amount of travel I did as a consultant, going away Monday, come back Friday, maybe be exhausted. And, in a way now I have younger kids and they get more of me because my situation has changed over time, or I've changed my situation or whatever. And there's a Rubble there, with my older kids is, they have a different feeling, and they also see me act differently now than I would have when I was with them. And I feel that, and that exists. That's real. That Rubble is real. And I'd love to use that as an example. I'd love to be open with you about when we find out, and even saying this, this is quite a public statement for me to say that I love all my kids with all my heart, but that I've been in a different state as each of them either were born or grew up. And and not because of them, because I love them all, is because of my particular situation. I would have acted differently, traveled more, traveled less, spent more time with them, had more money, had less money. When Rubble is it can. So what I'm going to say is there could be relationship Rubble. You added in quite a few different ones, but this is so important. I'd love to maybe even take advantage of you, Saud, and say, okay, Jonathan has some Rubble. How do we approach Rubble? How do we stop it from happening? When it does happen, and I'm saying, okay, I can see it, I can feel it. What do I need to do? If first of all, I mightn't have even wanted to recognize this because I was always thinking, I'm doing the best for everybody. I'm doing the best I can all the time, and then I would put that to the background. Denial, probably. I don't want to say it, but that's the truth. I would deny that this side effect was less important than my striving for the bettering of myself, Saud. So, I just want to give you something on the plate that we could maybe use as a purpose of how do we approach Rubble? What do we do? How do we recognize it?
I think, first of all, Jonathan, appreciate you trusting me enough to share that and expressing that. I appreciate that. And I think it goes back to what I said earlier, which is, man thinks X and then Y happens. So there is somewhere in there where we go off script. Something happens, which is potentially not what you want. I mean, you would want to give your time to all your children and, the same way, and because you obviously you love them, but there are certain constraints in your life that potentially took you off script. And then you have this realization that there's something there that I need to grapple with, which I need to acknowledge, which I can't just deny away, which I have to just say, look, this is how X number of years went, and this is the pros and cons of that life or that period. So I think there's this when you talk about Rubble in that context, I fully understand that, and I mean, and we could define things differently, right? I mean, I kind of look at Rubble even as things that you deliberately give up. Some would say sacrifice. Now we could look at it differently a little bit, but again, there's stuff in there which kind of bothers us, right? Which is not how things should have been, And it's just simple. It's very simple. It's like should have been better, should have been different. And in many cases, there's regret. Many cases, there's just sadness. Some cases, there's resentment. Because Rubble Rubble is a fascinating term because the more I thought about it after having a discussion with you, it kind of opened up layers and layers and layers to this word. But I don't know, maybe what we can do is, because this is a very sort of fluid conversation. It's like, maybe kind of talk a little bit more about the feeling side of what Rubble, what kind of feelings Rubble creates in a person, right? I mean, that's something maybe we can take from there. I don't know if that's
sure. Yeah. Absolutely. Like even I'll give my example is feelings I would say were suppressed for, in my head, a greater cause, which was income and quality of life. Now, quality of life by maybe financial terms or by status or situation terms, or health would always be the top of them. But time is something that I realize is something that I can never, ever go back and replay that time. So, it's also time, even if it was financial. I can't go back and invest in Bitcoin in 2008 or 9. Exactly. Time is that one thing, no matter which area we pick. I don't think we can go back. And how do we pick up what we can't replace? Or how do we accept we can't replace it and go forward? Because the Rubble is the lack of time we invested in something in our past for whatever reason. I didn't
Yeah,
invest
sure.
wisely enough financially. I didn't invest time in relationships. I didn't invest time in, in any type of encounter. How
Right.
do I, and I know I'm mortal, I'm going to die, so I also have a limited amount of time ahead of me. How
Yeah,
do
yeah, yeah.
the rubble of not investing time is we're always in a more precarious situation now. So, how do it, and that might be a difficult one. There's a situation that's already happening. How do we maybe prevent, or how do we choose, I don't know, standards or ideas so that we minimize encountering rubble? But let's maybe step back a little bit, Saud, and sort
Yeah.
of say, well, how do we, obviously keeping good, healthy people around us, but there's probably a few factors, and I'd love your before we get into it and try to solve it.
So okay, so I lost you there for a couple of seconds.
Oh
So
yeah.
maybe we're going to talk about how do we um, pick up whether we're heading towards the rubble. Is that what you were asking?
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
Okay. Okay. Look, I think so. To put it in the right context, right? Anything or any tragedy or adversity that we go through is full of lessons, right? So I would never say that, avoid risk at all times. So if you can avoid risk, we'll avoid rubble. That's not how life works. We will, as humans, have to face up to risk of one kind or the other. It's just how the nature of things is. But I think if you have I would say, a more of a growth mindset, and we've talked about this in the past, I think you can be better at identifying red flags. You can be better at having your own sort of self-awareness, having your situational awareness, improving your emotional quotient. You're just, saying what to whom at what time, right? And just planning things better. And we can get into all of this in more depth. But the idea behind this is that, we need to really understand that decisions, parallel or in serial, lead to certain outcomes, whether it's greatness in life or it's total rubble. Either you
Yeah.
go to the sky or you're just flattened out or you're in the ground. So just understanding that, number one, to put it simply, first thing you got to do is you've got to understand decisions count. So make better decisions, which means have the right information, minimize the number of emotional decisions, because emotional versus rational, rational typically wins in the long run. Red flags is this hindsight. What did I talk myself out of last time, which got me into this problem? And if I know myself well, I'm going to do this again. I know I'm going to do this again. I know this is my weakness. I keep talking myself out of or into situations. So, the first thing is planning awareness. The second thing is clearly, this sort of hindsight or red flag analysis. And I think the third one, which I think you mentioned, is your standards. Which standards are you holding yourself up to? Because if our filters are not that good, we're going to let anybody and everybody through the door. Our boundaries are porous. Anything can come in. So the adversity we're trying to, avoid, we can't. It will show up, but we can actually risk manage it a little bit. We can minimize the intensity of the loss and the frequency of how often we run into these rubbles. Because I know people, and I've gone through it myself, something or the other is always happening every 2 to 3 years. Something is always something, and they're like, oh, we're just destined for this, we're just attracting negative energy or what have you. I personally think a lot of this is just poor decision making. A lot of this, yes, happens because of factors outside of our control. And I think part of this is to also understand that you can't control and do not control everything. But yeah, you've got to be able to accept the fact that there's going to be uncertainty in our life. So let's try not to play God. Let's not try to account for every situation at all times. It's not going to happen. We're still going to suffer, but the question is, can we suffer less and more and less frequently, right? And I think that if our conversation, we can kind of dig deeper into the ups and downs of dealing with Rubble, what to take from a Rubble, and all of these things, I think people will get a better idea of why it's so important to look at adversity or tragedy in life and keep your chin up, and then really take this as a stepping stone or a springboard, rather than a slide down into, like they say, descend into hell. I would encourage people to make peace with the fact that life's going to happen to you. You got to be better every time. And how do you be better? The things we talked about. You've
Sure.
got to have the right, decisions. You've got to make the right decisions, rational decisions. You've got to have a good post-mortem, and you understand the red flags that you keep talking yourself out of. You've got to do a lot of tactics, and we can get into all these tactics as well. I mean, I've got a lot of thoughts on it, but I don't want to give you too long of an answer. I think that's kind of my initial response would be.
Oh yeah, no, I love that, and there's plenty in that we could take out. What I'd love to know now is, an event happens, so there's going to be Rubble.
I think I lost you there for hopefully a few seconds.
Oh yeah, sorry.
And you're back.
Can you hear me again? Yeah, sorry about
I can hear
that.
you.
When
No
event actually happens, Saud, we can go everywhere from fully accepting it, accepting the consequences, taking responsibility, and moving on fairly quickly. Or we can suppress it, deny it actually happened, and keep going. Now, they're the two, I would say, extremes. How do we best prepare ourselves to be closer to the first one of acceptance and dealing with it than the second one? What are the general reactions when events happen? That was just my example.
I think this is important. I think the last one, let's just take the last one first. I want to kind of share this with the viewers as well and listeners, that when an event like this happens, when like I said, you plan X and Y happens, and you are confused, you're dazed, you are in a lot of cases you are sad. I mean, you're feeling that there's a level of panic that sets in. A lot of people suffer self-esteem issues. I had a financial loss. So what is the world going to think of me? I'm not, I'm just probably a lesser human, or I've gone through a divorce. Am I going to be socially accepted now? I think the insecurities kick in. The natural defense mechanism kicks in. I did so well for like three decades, and then all of a sudden everything got pulled, the rug got pulled underneath my feet, because you know how this goes, right? The good happens and it takes decades. So the good takes the stairs up, and when the bad happens, it takes the elevator down. It's like this. You have a building that's standing for decades, and one earthquake, in 5 seconds, the thing is down to rubble. I mean, that's
Absolutely.
how life is. So people go into this shock, and sometimes they're like, "Oh my God, maybe," and then they suffer imposter syndrome. Do I really deserve this? And maybe I don't deserve all this abundance. I'm not deserving of it. I'm labeled a failure. So people develop like deep fears and complexes, I believe. I see this happen with there's a person I knew, and he just basically shut himself down after he went through a tough breakup, and he just basically lost meaning in his life altogether. And while on paper you'll say, look, there's these splits happening on a daily basis, especially nowadays. It's unfortunate, but that's the reality. I think we even discussed this in the group chat the other day. So people take loss and crisis differently. And when they take it, to some it hits like it's just a big gut punch, and some allow it to kind of settle in. But I want to spend some time talking a little bit about, Jonathan, if you allow me, to kind of how to look at this. These are two different ways to look at it, and this is
Please
kind of
do, yeah. Please do.
Thank you. So the first, I think, if I were to let's stick with the sort of the negative reaction, which is it's a natural reaction. So there's no judgment in this. I'm just kind of sharing what I think. You get overwhelmed. There's too much happening. It's a shock. You go into denial, like you talked about. Whether something is massive rubble or something that's small, either way, you could be easily in denial. People live in denial all the time. This is nothing new. This is, again, part of human nature. Okay, so maybe I'm trying to be strong, and I've read some self-help books that say, reflect. But there's just too many life lessons coming at me. It's just too much. I'm drinking from a fire hose. So I'm confused now. I've got the lessons, but I'm confused. And just like anxiety, I did a post on this recently. If you stay too long in the rubble, oh, look at what's happening around me. I used to be like this, and this is how I am today. And look at how great I looked 20 years ago, and what is happening to me now, and how much money I had then, and where I am now. This sort of, unfortunately, this pity party that we go into, we get sucked into this abyss. There's no escape. It's like a black hole, right? Some people just accept this immediate label of a failure.
Yeah,
you're not a good father, or you're not a good businessman, or you're not this, or you're not a good wife, or whatever the labels are. But then there are two other things that I've seen a lot, Jonathan, and one of them is loneliness, because when adversity strikes, I see a lot of people just shut down. And the other thing is this lack of trust in people, just not trusting people.
Sure.
Oh, people hurt me, so I don't trust anybody now. Even though the person who hurt me was like 1 out of a million, but I'm going to distrust the entire humanity now.
Yeah.
Right? This is kind of the natural reaction. And then the other thing people say is like, oh, the worst is yet to come. Now, I would flip the script.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I would want our listeners to take from our conversation. Guys, it's going to happen. Something or the other is going to happen in your life. But if you are in it, think of what you're getting out of this situation. I kind of look at going through a tragedy or adversity in life as an accelerated learning of sorts, an accelerated maturation of sorts, an accelerated awareness of sorts. It's all happening fast. It's like it's compressed wisdom. Stuff that you're going to learn in decades, you're learning in months, perhaps a year or 2 years. So you're ironically, even though you're suffering, but you're getting so much out of it. It's just, again, it's how you look at it, right? And you're not just learning from your mistakes. It goes back to what you were saying earlier. You're getting foresight and not making other mistakes, or in making new mistakes, so you can move forward, right? So you're trying to build that. Yep.
Here's something I'd like to ask you, Saud. Is something I have started to find useful, is journaling. So consciousness for me is very important. And
absolutely,
when I do journal more, I notice a lot more subtle things. So probably I pay attention to red flags more. Whereas when I just go about my day and I don't put that time away for 20 minutes to do a bit of journaling, what was I thinking? What was I feeling? What's going on? The big things seem to hit me without me noticing it. How does consciousness and our active participation in consciousness help us, either before the rubble might hit, like what I'm talking about, or even after the rubble, to sort of do the cleaning faster? Tell me a little bit about what you've experienced with how people do that or can do that. I'm sure there's a million ways.
Excellent point. I think my first reaction would be that, when you're trying to develop consciousness and awareness, a lot of it is happening subconsciously. So we're building consciousness subconsciously. And how are we doing this? By having this mindset that I'm going to problem solve this. I don't know how, but I am expressing as much as I can. I know a lot of people that just sort of hold it in. They don't have anybody to talk to. They don't have, not everybody is blessed to have good friends or people that you can fully trust and be vulnerable with. So many people journal. And as they're writing it out, it's like they're talking to themselves. I mean, they I don't know if they fully trust themselves, but at least they're talking to themselves.
Yeah.
And as that's happening, a lot of these connections start they're subconsciously coming together. And you start, yes, the one part is the catharsis. You're feeling lighter. Okay, I'm expressing anger, frustration. I'm expressing this, not knowing where I'm heading. I'm I have anxiety around it, but at least I expressed it. A lot of time, what I see is through journaling, we get better at labeling. So when you mislabel something, that creates even more problem. But when you write it, you've got time to reflect and think it through. You will label anger different than frustration. Frustration different than fear. Right? So, but if you just say, oh man, this sucks, and these are just generic sort of, blanket statements, and you don't have anybody to talk to, it becomes very difficult to let it out. So when the rubble is happening, there's this one is what you see in front of you. So you lose your money, let's say, you go bankrupt, or you go through a split. That's in front of you. The whole world knows it. But then there's the rubble that's developing inside of you. Why? Because you're like, I can't process this, too much, overwhelming, deny. And you can talk yourself out or into anything. We're humans. We are very good at lying to ourselves, to be honest. But it doesn't help you in any way. I think journaling is a good release valve. It's like a pressure valve.
Yeah.
And it may not give you all the answers in day 1, day 7, day 58, but it starts putting you in this place where you are consciously trying to make sense of all. You're consciously trying to understand what this chaos means. You're consciously trying to extract wisdom from this crisis. So I think that's where the brain comes into play, that it starts picking up on your conscious efforts and subconsciously starts giving you cues and clues that then later on, I think a few months down the line, they help you with the healing and just kind of navigating your way out of it.
Yeah, like I would say, I think at least this is one of my ideas, Saud, is there's a progression with journaling. Journaling is a safe place. It's you talking to you in your book and your writing and time to reflect. And why people often do that is everyone around them in the situation they are is somehow connected or dependent or they have an involvement with your life. So in order to have that space, you want to be able to talk to someone who's either not in your environment, and that can be just yourself in your journal, or it could be a coach, or it could be a completely new set of people, because wherever we have created a problem, most of the people in our life are somehow connected to us or associated with us, or they're dependent on us, or we're dependent on them. So to have clear thoughts or emotions is quite difficult. So I think of journal as almost the key to opening the door to other things, because it's a safe place, but yet you're still not talking to someone neutral or someone outside your normal circle, which is probably where you need to go to improve at some point in time. I don't know.
Oh, absolutely. I really like what you said here, because what you're doing is you're creating these bridges between your present and your designed future, sort of, or the future that you're architecting, let's say. You're creating the bridge. And I think the journal helps you get there, right? Like for me, it's the daily posts I do. So when I do this, yeah, I'm talking to perhaps a few hundred people, but I'm also talking to myself. You know, so for me, it's like okay, if I need to hear this, what words should appear on this piece of paper, and or what kind of quote or what kind of image I want to create today. So for me, it's really about finding these gateways, whether it's journaling, whether it's painting, whether it's sketching, whether it's doing podcast. There has to be an expression, like a release valve of sorts, that that helps you kind of make those bridges. And also one other thing I would just say, when we're going through these crises, where there's guilt and there's anger and all of these things and resentment, I've always found it important to distance your identity from the act. So if somebody is not able to, or somebody, let's say, lost money in a business or a venture, that doesn't mean that you're a loser who just loses everything, who touches anything and it turns to dust. What it means is your identity is you tried something and you did these 4 things wrong, and this led to this. It goes back to the series of decisions. And just understanding that actions, thoughts led to a certain outcome. And it's not you who's cursed by the gods or the universe, right? And I think whether it's journaling or whatever else it is that can help you release, you start distancing yourself from a lot of the negativity that can creep in very quickly. And I see this happen a lot with relationships as well. Like I see this with couples, and I've seen this with people who've been together for 20 years. That it's just, they allow all that goes wrong to become them. It's like they're just walking label. They're not the human that they used to be. They're just a walking label. So you've got to de-label yourself through these type of exercises.
I'm fortunate to have grown up in Ireland, Saud, probably for many reasons, but one of the reasons is the Irish language. And let me explain what I mean. Is in English, when we express something, we often say, "Oh, I'm happy, I'm sad, I am depressed." It's very much into your identity. But in Irish, I could write the words down later, but it's tá sásta orm, which, if you to translate it directly, means I take happiness upon me, and then I let it go. I take sadness upon me, because an emotion is not who you are. It's something you choose for a while, or you don't choose, whatever. You take it on for a while and you let it go. And there's no ownership either. Tá ruthar agam means there's a bike beside me. It's not my bike. So
yes.
The language we use, English, is often used in a way where identity is tied to emotion, or it's tied to property. So then when you lose property, you feel you've lost part of yourself. If you get a bad emotion, you feel you are that emotion. And so that has given me sort of a healthy separation mentally from the I am. I'm sure we've all heard of Wayne Dwyer. I am. There is no more to I am. Whether it's emotions or possessions or whatever else, they are things that come in and can come out of the space of where I am exists.
This is so critical. Some of my coaching clients, I've tried to push them towards a place where they have these separations from these past events, because we as human beings decide to go and live in them. Right? The memories that we have don't let go. They just got a very strong hold. And I keep reminding clients and others that I talk to is that, look, the purpose of memories is not to torture you. It's not to make your life miserable. The purpose of memory is to remember and be better from that information that you remembered. That's it. It's not designed to keep you hostage or in a prison. Memories are designed to tell you, look, when these things happen, you did this, and because of this and this and this, that happened. Keep that in mind. Then another memory, and then another memory, and then, but we decide to, for nostalgic reasons, for other reasons, we decide to just go back, and we decide to self-inflict, over and over again, not realizing that the whole purpose of this is to create a separation while also having access to the required information. So if I have a memory of trying to touch a burning candle, that helps me in the future, because now I see a candle, the memory tells me, don't go there, use it for a different purpose, so I can move on. But if we're going to go and keep putting our fingers back in the candle, that is something that, unfortunately, I've seen people who are stuck in the rubble. I mean, boy, that's a vicious down spiral. If I were to look at it that way.
So I have a question, Saud. Like, I've been a program manager most of my professional life, management consultant, program manager. And one of the things we do every time we finish a project is we do a lessons learned, and that's actually talking about the mistakes that we make during the project, so that, we're going to be taking on new projects. So we will do that, execute that next project better. Sure. How or why don't we do this in our personal lives?
Why don't we do this? Why don't we do this? We should be doing this, right? That's a good question. Why? Because this is so logical. This is so rational. I think we humans, 90% of our brain is running subconsciously, and most of us are emotionally driven. Most of us, unfortunately, operate from a place of scarcity and sort of this risk-aversive behavior, and not realizing. But are you still there?
I'm here, Saud. I'm here.
Okay, sure. I was just saying that we know that we we know the place that we're trying to take ourselves is not good for us. We know that the lessons learned should move us forward, but I think we always have the score to settle somehow. We need to settle the score. I think maybe some of it is ego as well. Like, no, somebody did me wrong, I need to go back and fix it. It's like, let it go, move on. You got a better life, live it, enjoy it, stop thinking about it. I think a lot of it has to do with how ego gets us, how emotions get us. And I'm not saying be egoless. I've talked about this many times. I think ego serves a purpose. It gets things done. But I also don't say be emotionless robot, because I think emotions what makes us human. But I think there's a, if you keep repeating the same mistakes, you will keep living in the rubble, and you'll never be able to get out of this dark place, which I honestly, I see a lot of people stuck in, and they're fighting to stay there. No, for example, I'll give you an example. I told this client of mine, is like, look, why don't you try XYZ? Like, try this approach. There was a business idea that we were discussing. It was like, but if I do it, what are people going to say? And then if I go out there, most likely it's going to get shot down, and it's going to be embarrassing, and what. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, you just don't want to leave the rubble, do you? You want to just stay right there and own it. And my whole point is, own the rubble in a way that you take the pieces, selective pieces, most of it's is gone. You re-engineer or redesign a new life, take the pieces you need and move on. Build from there. Yes, rubble humbles you, but it's not giving you a life sentence of misery. But we
So,
tend to just fight ourselves back into that place. Maybe we want sympathy, maybe we want attention, maybe we want a savior to come in and help us out. I don't know what it is, honestly. Maybe it's ego, whatever it is. But I think there are a lot of negative anchors that hold people down from coming out of it.
so I give credit to somebody, a guy called Kyle Cease, and he has this concept of holding space. I don't know if you've come across him.
Oh, yeah, sure, sure.
And really, is when we hit an event, we suffer a lot of, whether that's actual physical pain or suffering, which is kind of the mental stuff that we do ourselves, or emotions that we feel, to actually feel them, to actually be okay with spending a few hours or a few days or a few weeks accepting that they're there, and then it will move away from you because you're ready to move on. And I often think of the analogy is, let's say a kid has a toy and he's just received a toy, and the first thing a neighbor comes in and you say, "Oh, share your toy," but the first kid hasn't had the time to enjoy and fully embrace and accept that they've got it, and they already have to give it away. And I feel almost sometimes we do similar things when we hit an event and we don't know how to deal with it. And this could be good and bad events, and we don't actually sit in the emotion, but we push it away, or we don't take the compliment. We don't simply say thank you and accept it, but we say, "Oh, I could have done better," or, it doesn't have to be big things. We give loads of indicators that we are able to accept or not accept good and bad things. How do people, I saw you acknowledge that that, what are the different ways that we can become more accepting of things so that we are actually really ready to move out with the rubble and move on? That's one example. I think for me, I found that a very powerful one,
I mean, I think the word you just used, I think it's very important, because other than creating a space, which also requires you to distance yourself, so it goes back to the separation. So we separate ourselves from the event, the negativity. So now you've created a space, you've created the separation that you need. I think acceptance is critical. And I've talked about this, and I'm actually going to do a video on this too, which is acceptance allows advancement. If you're not going to accept, or you're going to fight the laws of physics and try to jump off the building, or if you're going to fight reality or truth, or you're going to pretend that life's laws are going to flex to your will, none of this is going to happen. So acceptance doesn't make you a lesser man or woman. If anything, it makes you a more real man or woman. And I think a lot of people struggle with that concept. When they accept something, it's like, "Oh, I'm accepting a defeat," accepting the fact that I put myself in this situation. I know it sounds good. It's a good soundbite that you should take ownership, take responsibility, but my ego is not going to allow me. It's not. And I think a lot of times they just don't have a safe environment or people around them or a tribe where they can go and accept. That's another thing, Jonathan, because if I don't think, after everything that I went through a few of my own rubbles. And had I been in denial, and had I held my line and said, "No, nothing wrong on my end, I'm a perfect creature, things happen to me, feel sorry for me," I think I would be critically depressed. Acceptance allowed me to just take this monkey off my back and say, enough is enough. Shake hands with reality, shake hands with truth. And at that point, that's the scariest part. After that, you get to exhale. Finally, you're like, "Oh man, I thought this was going to be bad, because I thought if I accept, then the people who are around me, they're going to flee, and I'm going to be rejected and all of this." Guess what? People are talking about you behind your back anyways. That doesn't change anything.
I think what's unfortunate, Saud, is we don't often have examples.
Yeah.
One of the things that's often talked about, and I have beautiful parents, but in some ways, like me and like my kids and like everyone we know, we're all immature in certain ways,
Yeah,
and we
that's
all
true.
haven't learned how to accept. So I think it's fabulous when people are brave enough, vulnerable enough, to actually, say, well, yeah, I messed up. I really messed up. And, let's say I'll go back to my case in the beginning. If I knew what I knew now, I wouldn't have behaved. That money would have been less important. That time with my
Yeah.
beginning kids would be more important. I'm just wondering to say that and have examples, because we are creatures of mimic. We learn by copying people that we look up to. We can call it modeling. And our mom and
Yeah.
dad are our heroes for the first couple of years of their life. No matter who they are, they're our heroes anyway. So I love how, you have your group Share, Learn and Grow, which we haven't mentioned so far, which I really like the conversation, because sometimes, even today now, as an example, I put a post later because one of the posts in your group provoked an answer that gave me clarity on my own thinking. And,
Yeah.
it's kind of that dialogue that allows everyone who's involved, because first, every time you answer a question, if I answer that question now or I answered 6 months ago, a lot has changed in that 6 months. I go, wow, that's blown my mind. I am much
Exactly.
clearer on this type of situation. And the acceptance and let me get back to the example of acceptance. And I like your sort of dialogue in your group where, people are coming up with, vulnerable situations, and,
Yeah.
sometimes there's also entertaining situations, etc. But being as much of an example, because a lot of people don't have in their direct circle of influence examples of people who are vulnerable and will say, I messed up. Here's what I did. I don't know the answer, but I'm open to working on it and figuring it out. And I feel that's, and that's why I even said what I said at the beginning of the conversation, because when we have more and more of us who are prepared to say and do that, it becomes a norm to actually accept. And then the rubble becomes less problematic, I'm hoping.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the thing is, Jonathan, in today's society, whether it's a man or a woman, my experience tells me that we're just so scared. So, I don't want to use that word, but you get the point. So scared to disappoint anybody. Yeah. Oh my God, what would they think of me? And I go back to what I said like a few minutes ago. First of all, you're not that important. I'm not that important. The world, people actually overestimate their own importance. Secondly, go with the assumption they're talking negatively about you. So what? So they're not your core tribe, anyways. So, which means that you have put a bunch of fake people around you to give you fake applause and fake support of whatever kind. But I have seen this decade after decade, Jonathan, that I've seen people turn friends over every 1 to 2 years.
Sure.
There are people who come and go.
Yeah,
Come and
yeah.
go. You got to get a promotion, you get a new set of buddies. You get a demotion, or you're out, or you're fired, you get a new set of buddies.
Yeah,
Yes, there are some people who stick around, but I see people churning for relationships. I see people talking about, oh, I blocked such and such person. The number of blocks are going up. The number of new friends are going up. It's like, what is happening in your world? And it's kind of like they're running away from this reality that, look, if something bad happened in your life, whatever that bad is, fix it, face it, deal with this dragon. It's going to get only bigger. You're not going to bury this. This thing is not going to be, you kind of look the other way and it's okay. It's not. Rubble is a place of learning. It's not a place to either live or pretend it doesn't exist. And I think what we're doing is, instead of sitting there for the time that we need to be there, we are either overcommitting to the rubble or completely running away from the rubble. So we're like two extremes. Either we deny it or we hug it so tightly that it suffocates us. And the reality is, the sweet spot is right in the middle, where You stay there, you're humbled, but you're not destroyed. And you need that rubble for your rebirth, for your
Absolutely.
resurgence, your phoenix effect. You have to go and find yourself in that mess, in that hell, in that garbage, whatever, however you want to describe it. People describe it differently. And then what you'll find there, you'll find mirrors. You will find this yourself looking, you're looking at yourself. The self-awareness picks up. You will learn about life. You will learn about people. You will learn about, stuff that's not taught in school. So Rubble is an amazing place, but it's temporary. And
So
as long as we acknowledge it that way and not completely freak out over it, run away, or fall in, this masochistic love, with the Rubble, then we're fine. Then Rubble serves us. It doesn't hurt us. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
no. It was I just did an exercise, and I was going to put it past you, Saud. About 6 months ago, I was following a guy called Dr. Benjamin Hardy. I'm not sure if you heard of him. He wrote a book called Personality Isn't Permanent, and it's really about personality is actually a result of whatever our goals are. Whatever our idea of the future is, that's how we'll behave, because we're working towards something. Now, the past also has an influence, and you have to let it go, and the present circumstances do as well. But and one of the things was, write down a list of every bad thing, or, in your own idea of what bad was in your life, and go through this exercise of saying, what happened? What were the benefits then? What are the benefits now because I did what I did then, or what happened then? And who am I now because of that? So I wrote a list of about 60 things. I did about 30 of them. And I have to say, I'm much calmer because of it. That's old Rubble, if you know what I mean. It's not necessarily fresh Rubble. And I'm just wondering, I avoided this for years, Saud. I would have avoided, I would have thought, I don't need Sigmund Freud. I don't need, nothing that bad has happened to me, but there's still Rubble there. And I actually thought the reason why I'm not that motivated is nothing that bad happened in my childhood. So I don't have the motivation or inspiration to actually have a specific goal in my life. I met a few people in my life who had very specific goals. They knew what they wanted to do, but the couple that I met, and there wasn't a couple, but like two people that I met, actually had quite negative things happen in their childhood. So you could see that their goal, their very specific goal, was a reaction to their childhood. Now, I never had anything that dramatic happen. I had a normal household. We had our good and our bad, but there was nothing that radical. And I thought the reason why I don't have a specific goal is nothing that bad has happened to me. But anyway, doing this exercise of listing all of the possible things or changes even definitely brought me down, just re-examining the Rubble, because I think differently now than I did when I was 7 years of age or 18 years of age or 23 or whenever those particular events happened. Because I don't think memory is, it's a forever thing. Every time we look at it, the new perspectives that we've taken on by living life make us look at it even differently. And just that alone was, and I only got halfway through, and I think the reason why I didn't keep going is once you get relaxed enough, you kind of get comfortable. I know I should get back on that list and keep going on it. And I'm just wondering what type of, like, that's what I'm giving one example, what types of ways, and I'd love to be practical here for the viewers as well, are good to approach Rubble, things that you can do yourself. We've mentioned journaling. I've mentioned sort of taking all the list of events. And I know you talk a lot about consciousness. I'd love to hear, one or two ideas that you could give that could have practical impact and people could do on a daily basis or something like that to deal with the Rubble that is in their life, or even was if they don't have any right now, and free themselves up a little bit.
Yeah, so I think, I think this is going to be in line with what I've done myself as well. I believe in dissecting the past. I believe in writing your narrative. first shot, like no overthinking, just as you feel, as you think, just put it on a piece of paper, no editing, none of that. That's my first sort of approach to it. And I actually did this with I don't know if you're familiar with Jordan Peterson's self-authoring program.
A big fan. Haven't done the program, but I'm a big fan of the guy. I'm fully aware of it. Yeah,
phenomenal guy. And I also did both the self-authoring and the future authoring. It's and I'll tell you what it did for me was that, yes, I did the sort of the raw dump, right? It's like everything that you feel, you just put it there. And then through his program, and not everybody will take his program, and it's a lot of work. It's not just a one page or what have you. But the idea is to go back and look at yourself, and what you end up going through is you start finding compassion. That's what happens actually. Okay. You go from this place of judgment. I am this. This is what I do. This is what I don't do. This is where I messed up. And if I messed up, I deserve to pay for the rest of my life. No, you don't. No, you don't. What you need to do is you need to look at the actions that put you in that situation and feel empowered that you're still alive, talking about it, thinking about it, having a chance to write your last chapter or multiple chapters. We are so obsessed with sticking with the labels, the perceptions, the perspectives that are downloaded to us by society that we want to just live in it. I went to when I went through, my skies were falling about 7 years ago, and I came to Pakistan, and I was in a class of 70 people. This kid gets up, he goes like, "Why would you give up all this money and all this opportunity to come to Pakistan?" And I said, "Look, it was a personal decision. I went through a lot. I had to be here. I had to rebuild, and that's it." But that was not a satisfactory answer for this person. They couldn't understand that, because he was a young kid, right? He's like 21 years old, hasn't really gone through anything too terrible in his life, couldn't really understand. But I think especially with people who have gone through crises, and there are quite a few, by the way, in our group, Jonathan, and they're very brave souls, and the brave soldiers, I call them. They wear their scars, proudly. All of them have a very high level of this is who we are, and a very high level of acceptance. And I think they've gotten here through both reflection, whether it's journaling, whether it's doing social work, building their own tribe, or really forgiving themselves. Many people have this guilt that they carry around in their hearts that, I did this to such and such person, and I don't know how I can get past it, and I'm a bad mom, or I'm a bad dad, or I'm a bad son, or whatever the case is. And I feel like when you go down this path of looking at your trajectory, you will find that you're just human. You're just like everybody else. And you've got to take it easy on yourself a little bit. I'm not saying don't take responsibility for what you did. That's a huge difference.
Sure.
Having self-compassion and then ownership, these are two things that go together. They're not exclusive. It's not like, oh, I forgive myself, so now I can just sit back and let the world serve me. That's not the idea. The idea is let go of your judgments. Because the one thing that Rubble is going to do is it's going to label you in your heart of hearts that you're not worth it, that you're somebody who's less. Life gave you so much potential. I deal with this a lot, by the way. Like, people come to me, they're like, I should be doing a lot more. I should be doing a lot more. I'm not performing, or I'm not making enough money, or I'm not where I need to be in my life. Very common, both men and women, by the way.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, but why don't you? Then what's holding you back? No, I don't know. I just, if I do this, if I do XYZ, will it make it okay? I'm like, no, you don't just react your way into another crisis. You don't jump from one, freak out to another freak out. You have to wrestle this thing right here. You have to hold your life on pen and paper, write it out. What is the issue? What is bothering you? And some of the narratives that I've seen, that have come across in some of my clients and even mentees, they're tough. I mean, you read it, and as a human being, you can't help but be affected emotionally. They share the deepest, darkest thoughts. And I have so much empathy and so much respect and love for these people, because it takes a lot. I mean, I first of all, I feel immensely obliged because they're trusting me with that information.
Yeah.
But when they do this, I feel like they all, drop half their weight. And I actually did this. There's this little video on this, a mini podcast, where I talk about, I see people around me, they're all like that Greek Titan Atlas, who's carrying the load of the skies and the heavens on his shoulders as he was condemned, by the Greek gods. We're no different. We're carrying these burdens on our shoulders, walking around condemned. Like, oh, we screwed up at some point in our lives, or we messed up somewhere. No, we should not be forgiven. We should be the condemned. And I think that's where self-compassion comes in. That's where the writing, and that's where the exploration, and that's where the unloading on helps you find that self-compassion. You better drop that burden, and I think to get out of that rubble, that's step one, to start writing.
Yeah,
that's what helped me, and that's what I suggest to all my clients. That is absolutely step one.
I think that's wonderful, Saud. What came to mind there was I read another book by Gabriella Bernstein called Judgment Detox, which detoxing yourself from judgment is actually a strong step in the direction of what you end up with is also self-compassion. It's really, what you're saying is aligning with so many of the people who are now really coming to the fore in, I don't know whether you want to call it psychology or sort of the ability to grow personally. I just like that alignment and self-compassion. I think compassion is a word that we don't often understand enough. What is compassion? Is it to be kind? Is it to be nice? Is it to be generous? How would you describe compassion? So
I think, so excellent question, because I see some people confusing pity with compassion, which is absolutely the opposite of what I promote. I tell people, never, ever, ever do pity yourself. Never let anybody else pity you, right? So let's just make that 100% clear. In compassion, there's no pity.
Okay.
What you're doing is you are making sense of why you did what you did. You are becoming aware of your weaknesses that led you to a certain rubble. Again, it's a set of decisions that got you here. You went from A to B to C to D, but did you go from D to E or D to G or H, or did you skip something? Did something go wrong? And if it did go wrong, then let's just do a post-mortem. Let's figure it out. What was it? Oh, you were too afraid to tell somebody that, or you just played along, or you just took this job because of whatever reason, and in the heart of hearts, you knew this was not the right thing for you. Whatever the reason is, and then things blew up, and then you felt like, oh, I worked so hard, and this company completely left me out to dry, or there could be a zillion examples. But my point is that when you're looking at compassion, you're really looking for rational understanding first. We're not going there to just go hug ourselves. That's not my perspective. It's not just, oh, I'm just doused in self-love, and I'm just just kind of like borderline narcissistic. But the way I look at it is, it's more about taking an objective third-party perspective and realizing that you're human, you're flawed, you will mess up, you did mess up, this is where you messed up. What are your thoughts on that? Yeah, I did it. What about your intention? Rate yourself on the intention side as well. And then you'll start realizing you might feel small. You'll be like, I don't like this audit. I don't particularly appreciate the fact that, I acted such a way. I acted like a low life. I've had clients who've said that word, used that word with me. I just acted like a low life. Why did I do that to my child or to my wife or to whoever? But that's where it starts, because once you're there, then everything else after that is up. From there onwards, now you are in a state of, wow, okay, so if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't do it. Excellent. That's a fantastic start. Good. You're already a better man or woman. Let's go with it. And I think that's where you just exhale and stop saying, judge Saud condemns, Saud to eternal misery. Just let go. You're released.
Yeah. So what I love about your group, Saud, I'll give it a couple of labels, and please take them with good intent. It's provocative.
Sure.
It's compassionate. It's supportive. And I think those three kind of, for me, they would be the three characteristics that sum up the approach of not just you, but the individuals who contribute and the individuals who listen within the group. Maybe you could share a little bit, if somebody was interested in being part of an environment, how would they reach out to you, etc., to contact you about getting involved? Because there are people struggling right now, and to know that there's a space, a safe space, or whatever we want to call it, a space where you can listen or you can contribute. And obviously, the more you do, the better it is. How could they come to be involved in your world in a better way?
Well, thank you for that. I think they can reach out to me on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube. I'm at Saud Masud, Saud Masud. If they reach out to you, Jonathan, feel free to send them a link on our WhatsApp group. You've got both links. Yeah. We've got one general group and one deep dive where we really peel the onion. And then you're absolutely right, because I made this group to create that safe space, to create that openness. Now, having said that, let me be very open that it's not for everyone. While we have, I don't know, what is it, like 120, 130 members in both groups, we've also had maybe a couple of dozen people leave. And the reason why a lot of people leave, and for some, maybe it's a style thing, there's just too much being discussed, and some people get overwhelmed. But some people have given me the feedback, which I appreciate, that they left because it got too real. They thought it was a place of, motivational quotes. Yeah. And it's not. I mean, yeah, there is some of that.
Oh, it definitely goes deeper.
Yeah, but it goes deeper. It gets real. And when it gets real, people start getting uncomfortable. And it's natural. And I respect them, because I feel like everybody's at a different point in the journey. And there are some people in this group that are very active. But when I talk to them one-on-one, I know why they're this active. Because it's their life. They're trying to problem solve in a space that is not afforded to them by anyone. Sure. They feel judged if they talk to their office mate. They feel judged if they share something in front of their kids. It was like, oh, Dad, I thought you were Superman. What happened to you? You know? So what you're dealing with is a unique space. I hope that it is unique. The intention is to, it's an open door policy. You come in as you wish, you leave as you wish. I respect both. And the idea is to not just treat you like somebody who needs a lot of care and it's all there. We're all, there's a lot of, I'm not talking about myself, but I'm talking about a lot of members here, bring a lot of wisdom and empathy and compassion to the group. but it's
sure.
also that we can learn from you.
Yeah.
And a big part of coming out of the rubble in life is actually helping others. I think that's a fascinating part, where people come in and like this, they feel empowered. Oh my God, I was sitting for 5 years. Nobody listened to me. I was just reading book after book. And for the first time, I am sharing ideas and somebody said, thank you. That one line could change their perspective.
Absolutely.
Give them
Absolutely.
this release, this purpose. And I think that's so important that, I mean, I didn't design it like that, but that's how it's turned out.
Well, I'd love to say, Saud, I'm delighted you did. I'm delighted we've made contact. You know, it just started with me looking at some visual posts. I feel I talk to you almost every day now, whether it's through the group,
Yeah, pretty much.
etc. Because there's a wonderful dialogue that's going on. I would recommend anyone who's interested in Saud's work, what he does, his group, just contact me or Saud.
Yeah. I think I might have lost you there, Jonathan.
Oh, sorry. Just join. Yeah, sorry. Just join his group and contribute in whatever way is appropriate for you. Reach out to Saud or me, and we'll happily connect you to it. I'd love to say thank you again, Saud. It's a pleasure. This has been the second, and there was a couple of nuggets there that I can see a few more coming up in the future. Saud, thank you really for the conversation.
No, I would love to. Again, thank you very much, Jonathan. Would love to keep the dialogue going. You know, I think it's we're just starting to kind of tease away some of these ideas and bring it down to practical levels. I think just the conversation, just the fact that we are having these discussions and we're two men having these discussions, I think that's something a bit out of the ordinary as well. I think it's sort of like this green signal that this is not the domain of just just perhaps women who are more expressive. Perhaps they can share probably better and more effectively. I think there are a lot of men who are quiet, they're struggling, and they also need to be heard or help them process whatever's burdening their minds and souls. So I just want to acknowledge that from a gender perspective as well. But again, our group is for everyone, and we welcome everyone, and we would love to keep this dialogue going. Again, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. You always make me get better. So I thank you for that.
Likewise, and I would say that's absolutely mutual, Saud. Thank you very much. My blessings to you and everyone in Islamabad and Pakistan where you are, because I know that's where a lot of your fan base are. I've never been, and now I'm actually getting more and more curious. As you create friendships, the desire increases, you know?
Well, one thing we can guarantee you that you're a big walker, and you do these you do these hikes and do these walks. Islamabad is full of trails. So you come here, you're going to feel right at home.
Brilliant. Love it. Have a wonderful evening, Saud. Thank you very, very much.
All right, my friend. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.